Order, please. The Honourable, the member for the District of Signal Hill, Kitty Biddy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm very pleased to stand today in response to the official opposition's non-confidence motion to the budget brought in some weeks ago by the Minister of Finance. I shall be supporting this motion, Mr. Speaker, for reasons that will become obvious. I consider what we do here today very serious, and it's one of the reasons that I don't do this very often. I'm using a text today that I plan on sticking with, and the reason being I want to lay out very clearly where we come from as the NDP when it comes to economic analysis. Budgets are very important because they are a clear statement of a government's priorities. The government has called Budget 2010 the right investments for our children and our future. The question I get to ask today, Mr. Speaker, is whether or not what the government says is actually what they have delivered. Budget 2010, Mr. Speaker, is an excellent example of smoke and mirrors. Their government is counting on their ability to fool people, into thinking that spending money means investing in the future. My party is delighted, Mr. Speaker, that the budget has money in it for new school construction and replacement, for new hospital construction and replacement, for the maintenance needs of Memorial University, for maintenance and reconstruction of our highway system, and for a host of other infrastructural expenditures. But guess what, Mr. Speaker? These expenditures are just that, expenditures. They are not investments in children and the future. They are expenditures that must be made to meet the needs of our society. New schools must be built where student populations are rapidly growing. Schools must be repaired and replaced when they can no longer be safe environments for the occupants. The same is true of hospitals and other medical facilities. Highways must be improved and maintained for the sake of safety of people on the roads. The dollar signs that the government is flashing around in its budget, Mr. Speaker, are only expenditures on what government is expected to spend money on. It's their job. A responsible parent doesn't expect praise for keeping the house in good physical shape, for making sure there is adequate money for food, or for keeping children clothed. The parent is doing what a parent must do. If the parent doesn't do those things, the parent will be found derelict of duty and could end up losing his or her children. A government, Mr. Speaker, that doesn't do its duty will lose its power. It is the job of elected government to ensure that systems are in place to deliver what is needed for the well-being and security of people as individuals and as members of a community. It is the job of elected government to make sure that the communal pot is shared so everyone is living in a healthy and nurturing society. It is the job of elected government to create systems that work for everyone, not just for some. But where is the vision in Budget 2010, I ask, Mr. Speaker? My concern about this and previous budgets of this government, Mr. Speaker, is that there are no plans for the present or the future. The government says that this budget is an investment in the future, but it doesn't talk about what that future holds, Mr. Speaker. This budget shows a drop in provincial revenues in almost every area, Mr. Speaker. There is a drop in taxation revenue, a drop in investment revenue, a drop in consolidated revenue funds and other entities. The only major increase in provincial sources of revenue, Mr. Speaker, is in offshore royalties. This budget floats on a pool of oil, a pool that began draining from the moment it was tapped. We need a long-term plan from this government for sustaining our economy and our society beyond when oil is being pumped from the floor of the Atlantic. Mr. Speaker, we need a vision, we need a plan. Where is the $2 billion in revenues that we see in Budget 2010 going to come from in the future? From the fishery, a potentially sustainable industry that this government is slowly watching die without any idea of how to stop the bleeding? From the creative new environmentally friendly projects that they are planning but not telling us about? From new manufacturing industries that are connected to our natural resources, such as we see governments developing in other parts of the world? Mr. Speaker, for all intents and purposes, this government has no plans. They say they have plans, but what are they really, Mr. Speaker? Let's look at some of them. They say they have a plan to reduce poverty, Mr. Speaker. However, in the past 3 years, they have presented us with budgets that benefit the wealthy rather than those with lower incomes. How is that going to help reduce poverty? What kind of a plan is that, Mr. Speaker? The so-called investments in poverty reduction, Mr. Speaker, cover everything from enhancing the Family Justice Services Division to budgeting $200,000 for the continuation of the home heating oil tank storage replacement assistance program. I'd like to know, Mr. Speaker, how being able to access the court system or having government pay for a new oil tank that government regulations say must be installed is helping reduce poverty in this province. I don't see a plan, Mr. Speaker. I see spin. I see smoke and mirrors. The government did take action 2 budgets ago to raise the minimum wage. I applauded them for that. The last increase in that plan takes place on July 1st of this year. Already, Mr. Speaker, the increases that have been made are not worth what they were worth 2 years ago. Does this government have a plan to build in annual increases to reflect the increases in the cost of living that they forecast in the budget? If they do, they haven't told us. If they don't, in 2 years' time, the minimum wage increase will be worth half of what it is worth today. What kind of a plan is that? It is not a plan that will help home care workers who make just over the minimum wage. Another of government's plans, and one that they are so proud of, Mr. Speaker, is the plan for this province to have the lowest rate of personal income tax in the country. Once again, the tax levels will be reduced